Howdy everyone, I am back with what is a bit of a weird game in the fourth round of the Smith F Invitational. Um, I have taken again my B sideboard. So I think I discussed that in the list review video, but basically it's two Beast Giants, two Jabberwocks, two Briar Beasts, some Chaff, some Chariots, and a unit of fighting Razor Tusk Herd, and a unit of fighting Wildhorn Herd, like with the Banner of Wild Herd paired weapons. Then I've got a super quick Centaur Chief, an Evoke Master who fights, and a Shamanism Adept who also fights. I drew for this round Casimir and his Vermin Swarm. This was only my second game against Vermin Swarm. Like the new book, I should say. And to be honest, I didn't look like. I mean, I looked at his list before we played, but like it would have required me to spend more time reading the book and stuff than I really wanted to do. So, going into the game, I only had a vague idea of what things did. He gave me quite a handy sort of explanation before the game to make sure that I, wasn't misunderstanding anything completely. But basically, he's got the Dictator who makes things unstable. He's got a Bell to give things 6+ ward save. 2 units of like spear guys. It looks like one of them actually has shields. 2 units of slaves. A big unit of Fethus Brutes. Some of the like, I don't know what they used to be, but the like gutter runnery type blokes, the Shadow Fur Stalkers they're called now. They're just skirmishers with a pistol. He has 6 Jezzails with a like character who can sit in them and I think give them 3 up. He gives them some kind of booster hit and it might make them a 3 up. Or it might make them 4 up if they started at 5 up. I don't really know. He's got some Murmelo Brutes with rotary guns. I think they all have it. The way he explained that to me was basically that they're like bombardiers from ogres. So, and that seemed to be the case when he was rolling for them. So it seems to be a pretty good comparison. He's got 3 flamethrower thingos. Ignifier Grenadiers, which is the old like lobbing gas globe guys, but now they're strength 6. But aren't very good at hitting and maybe have 2 shots. I don't know. And then he has Dreadmill Chariots, who are really weird because they're advanced 5, but they get +6 to their I think multiple things, but they get not +6, plus D6 to a few things. But the important one for me was their charge range rolls. So he had a maximum distance that he could declare of 17, but then if I was in that 17, it was actually really fast relative to that. So I didn't know how this game would go, but it looked pretty tough for me because I didn't know with halving combat halving like wounds. I didn't really feel like I had the I don't know enough blocks with enough attacks to deal with them, and eventually I was just going to get ground down, particularly with the shooting being able to go into combat. So I mean, I didn't really have too complex thoughts going into the game. It was more sort of like, we'll get on the table and see what happens. Assuming I'm over here. Cool. This is after like deployments and vanguards. I rolled up. No, he got to choose sides. Man, I don't even know. Maybe the next thing will tell me. Okay, yeah, it looks like I got to choose sides, so I chose one with cover. And he deployed everything to go first. So I kind of counter-deployed here, but it was a little bit tough. Obviously, so he's got Jezzails on the hill, and he's got his flamethrowers here. And I think these blokes scouted, but they could go wherever my monsters were, so it didn't really matter. I chucked all of my monsters up here, sort of as like hopefully giving him too many threats so that some of them would get through. Because obviously this isn't the place where they want to be with all this shooting. Mainly the Jezzails more than anything else. The flamethrowers are more scary for the block. But I figured if I put them down on the right flank, they probably, like, because these monsters aren't that good. Like, they probably can't beat the Fethis Brutes, is my theory. I don't have enough attacks, and I don't have a high enough strength. So, with the weight of attacks he can pump back at me, I expect to lose that, even if I send in, like, 3 monsters. Maybe my maths is dumb there, but I didn't think that would go well. Even if I sent multiple of them at the Fethis Brutes. So, that's basically why I put them at the top, where I was like, even though it's not where they want to be because of the shooting, I think that even if I lose some, they might become useful later on. Other than that, I was sort of like I didn't know how I was going to deal with these Fethis Brutes. I didn't really have a good solution to the problem of them being like pretty fast into like Ag4, tough 5, and having just a boatload of attacks. Like, I didn't really want to do anything with them. And for objective, by the way, it was King of the Hill, and I chose this field, and my opponent chose this wall. So, yeah, basically, my Wild Horns were there because I was like, look, maybe I can get onto this wall and just sort of like hold on. If not, I might make it hard for him to get into the field. They were basically there because they're scoring and they're decent at fighting. So, like, it's not as if I was scared of fighting the infantry blocks. I was scared of fighting the Fethis Brutes for sure. But the infantry blocks, I was like, well, I probably have a decent chance, but I don't really know because, like, the halving combat res from wounds really mucks with sort of like my internal maths. Like, so I have a general idea that isn't really like consciously calculated about how much damage I would expect them to do to a res 2 block of infantry guys, but I haven't really adapted in my brain. It might not happen because this is the only army that it matters for, but it might just take time of playing against Vermin Swarm. But like, I haven't figured out sort of naturally the vague maths. Usually I have a pretty good idea of what the maths is, but with the halving combat res from wounds, it throws me off quite a bit. So I'm like, maybe I can fight them, but I could also just be wrong there. I kind of like, I mean, with the vibe of the tournament as well, I was sort of like, I was happy to find out in game, you know, like, I'm not going to be scared of the variables there and say, nah, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to hide in this corner and see what happens. But yeah, so I'm not sure if I could fight them very well, but that was my thinking. I was like, I'm happy to find out in this game. Other than that, I just put my fast things basically down on the right flank because one, to sort of like help zone out those chariots, but also like if the Fethis Brutes try and push in to take a... Well, I don't think they're scoring, so I don't think they could take the objective, but to threaten my big block, I might be able to get some like flanking threats in and stuff. So on his first turn, he put a bunch of wounds with his grenadiers into one of my giants. He did a lot of damage to the Wild Horns, which I wasn't expecting, and wasn't ideal. And he brought up a unit of rat swarms. But that's basically it. He pushed a little bit, but mainly he kept his form. My turn. Ooh. Okay, that's what happened. Cool. Also, my BSB's up in this ruins, but I got to the point where I didn't really know what I was doing with him, to be honest. Because he can't fight any of these blocks one-on-one. Where he probably would be happy to if they didn't have the half combat res thing. Although he'd get bogged down, so maybe he just doesn't want to anyway. But like, he didn't want to get shot, so he was hiding in there for cover. But then he didn't really have any valuable targets over there to try and get. So I sort of got to this point in the game going like, I don't actually know what I'm doing with him. Otherwise, I just sort of I pressed up a bit. I think the deal with the wounded giant was that even if theoretically, because my giant charged the flank of these flaming guys, theoretically he's not going to be there. Even if you can get past the Jezzails and charge my giant, it's sort of like a corner clip type situation where typically I would expect a giant to beat that block. Otherwise, I just sort of, jockeyed for position over on the right flank. I reformed my Wild Horns because there was no point being as wide anymore. Kept them in cover there, but sort of moved them up to be a little bit more relevant. I chaffed the Feth's Brutes. I don't know if I needed to at this point, but I think I was just worried about them coming all the way up. And then me being in trouble early, so I was sort of wanting to keep them further back and at least not if he did decide to charge and like overrun, he could get in that spot. But then if he is in that spot, he doesn't have control over like his angle, whereas otherwise he could make sure that everything's in the front, for instance. And I think based on this, it was sort of like with a reasonable overrun, I'd probably get a flank charge with the Razor Tusk Herd. I think in Magic all I did was get Blooded Horn Totem off on this guy. I don't know how many pitches I have, so we might just be in for an adventure here. Okay, so I got hard target and Magic Res on one of the Jabbers. I think just I had spare dice and nothing else relevant really. And I got Blooded Horn off on the Giant because it meant that he could get through the armor easily of the weapon team, basically. He needed maybe a 7 or an 8 to get into the slaves, but he failed, so, shit happens. I think it would have been in their flank. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he started in their flank, so it would have been a flank charge if I had, but yeah, as I said, very failable, so... and I think I basically only charged them because I was like, they did so much damage to my Wild Horns, I don't want to let them shoot again. That was my turn 1. This is the end of his turn. So, what's basically... end of his turn 2, I should say. What's basically happened is he's brought up his little pistol guys on both sides. He's sort of drawn back on this bottom right flank. And... he's done, I think, through like the rolling 1 to hit, done some wounds to his own Jezzails. He's almost killed this Giant who's sitting there with 1 wound left. And the slaves charged my Giant, and because of positions of things, basically could only clip him. I turned to face him, so my Giant was fighting against 1 file of slaves, and I lost. I'm pretty sure my opponent rolled a lot of like ward saves, so I don't think it's what should have happened. But after that, I was just sitting there going like, oh, if your slaves can beat a corner clipping Giant that auto hits and has a Thunder Stomp, what the fuck is anything else in my army going to do? How am I going to deal with these blocks? So I was sitting there going like, I don't know that I can fight any of these things. Like, the blocks are probably scarier than I thought. I know I can't fight the Feather Brute, so I wasn't really sure what I would be doing, basically. That was the main thing that happened there, I guess. Giant managing to live was quite handy. Particularly because, as you can see, the Jezzails are just sort of poking their edge out in front of these guys. So my Giant was able to get a corner clip in my turn, which will be in like the next thing. So just leaving that, we had a bit of a, not a long discussion, but one of those things where I think potentially my opponent even like said, oh shit, like I've seen this, like I've left this open for you. And we had a discussion that was one of those things where I was saying like, oh, like, dude, if you meant to keep those guys like in front of them, like just do it. And he was like, no, I never thought about it. I didn't think about it. You have to punish me. So it was a pretty good spirit game in that sense because, we weren't trying to catch each other out. And even though I gave him the opportunity to basically take back something that he was definitely not happy with leaving, he was very honest and like, no, like, this is my mistake and I'm not taking that back even if you offer it for me. My next turn. Ooh. Yes, that looks... What the fuck happened to my... Oh, Jezzails must have killed one of my... what are they called? Jabberwocks. As well, because there's one less there than there used to be. Maybe the pistol guy shot it as well. I don't know. Okay, so this is after my movement. So what have I tried to do? I've charged the Giant in to fight these blooks. I have charged the chariots at his pistol guys because he kept his chariots a little bit too far back, which meant that even after I clear them, it doesn't matter too much. I sent my Razor Tusk Herd at his Murmillo Brutes. That meant that they copped to stand and shoot. I think they took some wounds from the shooting phase previous as well, but basically they've lost 5 wounds from the unit. I chaff the Feather Spirits again. And I just brought this Jabberwock over basically with his purpose was he was going to breath weapon the Grenadiers, and hopefully with his like -1 leadership aura particularly, hitting both those units, hopefully cause a panic on them. And his position was that way because basically if I killed 4 guys, I think the angle might have been able to put, like in terms of center to center flee, might have been able to run him through the other guys to cause an extra panic with -1 leadership, but it didn't work out. I either killed 6 or I killed 7. However it happened, like there was nothing. There was no panicking the other guys, basically. I brought my BSB over into my Wildhorn block because there was nothing else good for him to do, basically, and those guys were scared of the blocks, basically. The combat should be... Oh, I guess the important thing with the combat with the Giant is because he's only got 1 wound, he might just... Like, a lucky shot is just going to kill him anyway. But killing the Jezzails, particularly when I've only got 1 wound left anyway, I was like, this is probably worth it. Oh, did we... Okay, yeah, so... Panicked those guys as we thought. Giant killed a bunch of Jezzails. They stuck because of crumbling and all that jazz. Yeah, because they didn't break and they managed to have 1 wound left, basically. Apparently I brought the Briarbeast up as well, because he's obviously going to be a pain with these blocks that don't have much output when he's unbreakable. My Razortusk herd did really well. I had a good magic phase. I think I was lucky. Like, one, I got the big one so I could throw a bunch of dice, but I think I was lucky with a couple of casts, maybe, that meant I got 2 spells off. But I got off the Beast Herd Hereditary on the Razortusk herd, so it meant that they caused fear and gave an additional -1 leadership. And I got Whispers of the Veil off on the Brutes, so they were testing on leadership 3 for fear. With minimized and re-rolling, but like leadership 3 is pretty shit, and they failed it. And then they got round into on the overrun onto the chariots as well, which was pretty cool. I was a bit worried about the Dictator coming to the side, but at the same time, my opponent rightly pointed out that he's not that good in combat. I'll probably do a bunch of wounds to the chariots, and for each one I kill, they're going to hit things within range with strength 4 hits. I think it's like D6 or something. But it sort of puts his Vermin Demon in a lot more danger than he wants him to be, given how important he is to the army. I don't know what happens to my opponent's turn. We'll see. Okay. A shitload happens between this and the next screenshot, so I'll have to explain it. Basically, I think these spears didn't go in because he... I don't know why. Oh, I think it was because they were in the rear. So he couldn't charge, because I couldn't turn to him, and he couldn't get around the impassable. So basically, there was no way for him to complete the charge with the Legionnaires here. So that's why he didn't charge. I'm pretty sure he charged my chaff and killed it here. He didn't charge the Vermin Demon. He turned around, did something with it, I don't know. My Razortusk just cleaned up these guys. And then, what also happens, that was all in his turn. Then in my turn, I had a free Giant who killed the Jezzail, and I had a free unit of Razortusks who, because of the Beast Herd Hereditary, still caused terror. The Giant basically just went, this bell block had sort of moved up a bit, but basically he just went, look, I'm on 1 wound, I'm playing with house money, I'm just going to charge the bell block and see how many I can kill or what damage I can do and force a break test or something. What actually happened was the bell unit failed its terror check. It ran over to about over here in front of the lower field. And then I charged it off with my gargoyles. So it just ran off the board, which was an easy way to deal with that. And then, knowing that my Razortusks were facing the flank of these Feather Spruits, and knowing that they didn't have an Eagle Standard nearby, So there would be leadership 6 against a terror check. I just declared a charge with the gargoyles into the Feather Spruits. And then when I redirected to charge the Feather Spruits, and then when the Razor Tusk charged them and they failed their terror, it meant that when they end up sort of around mid-board, the gargoyles basically auto-kill them. So in one turn of basically like unlucky leadership, and the fact that he lost his Eagle standard down here, which on the Murmillo Brutes, which was quite important, it was like 2 of the most dangerous things on the board are now dead. Which, yeah, like my opponent, I think in his podcast was talking about this, where it was like it's a bit frustrating when you've just got like you've got basically like fine leadership, but when one fails, everything can collapse, which has apparently been his experience with the army. And it might be the sort of thing that, like, really good players who have really good macro strategy can plan around that and make it not so much of an issue. But I absolutely saw that problem in this game where I was like, yeah, you're right, you failed the terror check that you shouldn't have, and then probably should have, like, odds on failed the terror check with the Feather Spruits, but a little bit hard to avoid because you needed the Eagle standards nearby, and there's a lot of like leadership bubbles to manage, which is probably quite difficult. So yeah, a bit of a sort of almost disappointing part of this game where I was like, I think I'm in a bad spot, and I don't know what I'm going to do to get out of it. And how I got out of it was just my opponent had unlucky leadership and lost 2 of his most... But he's basically, if you don't include the Dictator, his 2 most important units he just lost. So that was a little bit sort of... I kind of felt bad about the fact that, I didn't outplay him in that moment. It was just sort of unlucky dice at the wrong time. But yeah, they blew up. So this is where we got to. Basically, we were able to redirect the Razor Tusks into the Slaves. The Gargoyles there after having killed the Feather Spruits. The Giant just failed his charge. And I also put the Briar Beast into the rear of these guys because, extra wounds, extra combat res, whatever. And because now we're only facing Slaves and not multiple things converging at once, I just moved the Wildhorns up onto the wall to take that objective, basically. And that's the story of that part. Yeah, look, not all that much. Like, obviously these Slaves, like, explode. I'm never going to get these guys up here. This bloke's probably never going to rally. He's on half leadership at the moment with an extra -1. So basically, I think my opponent charged my Wildhorns. Yeah, I think that's what happened. And then in 2 turns, I blew them up. And after that, I sent my BSB on a long charge into his Dictator. Basically, I think that combat's about 50-50, given that I have the better magic. But it's the sort of thing that in a more serious event, I would just go like, you know what, I'm going well. I don't want to lose my BSB. I've got the objective. I've got a points advantage. Like, let's not worry about doing that at all. But it seemed very much to me like a more fun option in the time to send my BSB over to fight his big Dictator to see what he could do. Yeah, otherwise I just sort of pinned his Clan Rats, or his Legionnaires. So, I don't know if I've got any more pictures. Yeah, alright, I mean, first round of combat I did some wounds. I got off distracting on my BSB and Whispers on his Dictator. Yeah, okay, this is the last picture. Cool. And basically all that happens is I end up with my multiple ranked units being able to charge his Legionaries, popping them. No. So what happened first was that my BSB managed to beat his Dictator, which I think I got a little bit lucky on my saves, but like, as I said, it was very much like a toss-up kind of combat where, particularly because he is stubborn, but I won that first round because I had, charge, banner, 3 wounds, and he did 1 wound to me. So I won that by 4, and with Whispers of the Veil basically won it by 5. Oh, no, I didn't win it by 5, but he's taking a leadership 5 test, and if he'd failed, he'd take 4 extra wounds. So this might even be the second round. I don't know. But basically, like, there was moments where if he fails his leadership check, even though it is stubborn, and because he's got an Eagle standard minimized and rerollable, I would be doing extra wounds on top even. So the end result was that I just killed him with attacks, which was great. And then when these guys were no longer unstable, having ranks in their flanks, I think they couldn't kill a Longhorn. Basically meant that they popped and I ran him down. So at the end of the game, I had everything here alive. The Briar Beast that's down here died, but I had everything sort of here alive. Chariot died to these things pinging off him, and he just had the Shadowfur Stalkers. So it was a big win. I think it was 19. I think it was 19-1. Not 100% sure. But yeah, a bit of a weird game because my opponent just sort of got unlucky at the wrong time, and rather than me feeling like I played a brilliant game, it was sort of like a straight up and down. All right, I moved up. All right, I charged. Cool, you failed some leadership tests. I won. Like, I didn't do anything particularly clever in this game. I don't think, my macro strategy was all that good. It was just a bit of a weird mash everything together and see what happens kind of game for both of us, I think. I don't know about these new Vermin Swarm. There seems to be some things that are still very volatile in that book. It's a really hard task being like making big blocks work when they generally don't, particularly big blocks of like shit things, when they generally don't work in 9th. And I think they're doing a really good job of trying on that one. But I think the Fethys Brutes stand out as like a bit over the top. Mainly, I think if you just took away their toughness 5 and went their toughness 4, everything else is probably alright. But yeah, like I don't like the leadership mechanic much because it's like it doesn't matter as much to me. There's a little bit of counterplay where I can try and take out Eagle standards. Maybe I don't know if I got lucky here or what, but for a Vermithorn player, I feel like I just sit there and go like, fuck, I don't really want to be thinking about all these stupid little bubbles. I just give me leadership 8 and I'll deal with leadership 8 because it's basically the same mathematically, and we just call it a wash and go, I don't need all this Eagle standard and all this like micromanaging stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a strong opinion on most things in the Vermithorn books. I haven't played it that much, but the leadership just seems like so finicky for nothing. Like, it just seems like you're putting a lot of complexity and a lot of mental strain on the Vermithorn player for not that much gain, because one, I don't think it's a fun game. If the goal is to have situations like this where if you fail a leadership test, like your whole battle line can collapse, I don't think that makes for a fun game. Particularly not for the Vermithorn player, but as I said, like I didn't feel like I played super well to win this game. It was more the leadership tests that let my opponent down. And I don't think it's fun really for either player if you, like, your army is sort of has that massive fail point that they can just collapse on. And the mechanic itself is just sort of like a more complicated leadership 8. Basically, it's probably like even if the average is like, you pass 90% of your leadership 6 minimized rerollable and you pass 90% of your leadership 8 rerollable. I think that's the maths. Or like vaguely that. I think the probability curve is probably different. So like you're going to have maybe Vermithorn even be more reliable. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm not sure. I'm not sure on that one. My maths brain is letting me down. But regardless, I don't know that it's worth it. And I think that might need to be reconsidered as a mechanic for the overall book, if I'm honest. But this was a really good game. It was really fun. Yeah, I enjoyed it. And we've got round 5. I don't know how it's going to work, to be honest, because it's the 15th of December now. I think we've got up until like New Year's to play the game. And and coordinating across time zones around a really busy period for most people. Like, I don't know. I missed my round 2 because Omar basically disappeared. He wasn't very keen on. I don't know if he wasn't keen on playing our game, but I think he wasn't all that keen on the tournament when we were talking, and we never really found a time that worked. I had a little bit of trouble getting him to respond to my messages, but I missed my round 2 game, and now Omar's gone. I don't want to miss my round 5 game, but we'll see if we can make it work with time zones and stuff. Because I also don't like. I've had enough of getting up at like 4 a.m. to play games against people in Europe and stuff. So we'll see if it actually. We'll see if we can get a better time than that. But that would basically necessitate the weekend, which I think at this time of year might be difficult, particularly for anyone who has kids or something. But I don't know if my opponent does. So we'll just see how it goes. But otherwise, it's been a good tournament so far. It's been pretty fun. And I'll catch you, if not on that video, on something else. Maybe I'll have more random shit like book reviews that nobody asked for. Anyway, catch you guys.